Welcome to another episode of Books in the World. Books in the World is a 50-year-long cable television tradition produced by Cape Cod Writers Center. It interviews and discusses all things literary. Today, we're fortunate to have Leigh Dannhauser. Leigh has actually written the book, Nothing Works, But Everything Works Out. It's her Peace Corps experience in the West region of Cameroon. Leigh served in the Peace Corps from September of 2017 in the West region of Cameroon. She never actually saw herself as a writer, but actually, after daily journaling, realized that she had a story to tell and saw this opportunity to share her story with this book published in December of 2019. Born and raised in the Bronx. Oh, no, born and raised in Bronxville. Is that different than the Bronx?
Very different.
Very different. You can tell what I know and don't know about New York. Leigh has a bachelor's degree in journalism and in religion from Washington and Lee University, as well as a master's degree in commerce from the University of Virginia. She's currently attending UCLA Law School and plans one day to be a human rights attorney. Joining the Peace Corps for her was, although a devotion, it was fraught with starts and stops. Her first assignment in Peru literally washed out in a mudslide. And then this assignment in Cameroon began during their long-standing civil war and had to be restructured demographically to accommodate the conflict that was going on. Welcome, Leigh. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Did you want to tell us a little bit about your rough start? You were pretty adamant to have a Peace Corps experience.
Yes. So as you said, my original Peace Corps service was literally washed out. It was just 3 weeks before I was supposed to go. I was ready, and they had these massive floods that caused mudslides, and they canceled my training group. And they asked me, Leigh, do you want to be reassigned? And so they reassigned me to Cameroon. And then the week that I arrived in Cameroon was when the conflict in specific region of the country had escalated. Mm-hmm. So that's where their focus area was and where our training site even was. And that was, they had to evacuate. So they had to, on the spot, right when we got there, reorganize, restructure everything. Where we were going to go, where we're going to train, et cetera.
Did they consider sending you home?
I honestly don't know. They might have, mm-hmm. But they didn't share that with us. For us, they're like, yeah, we're going to figure this out. And I think that mentality helped shape my service. Like, if they could figure this out with this dropped in their lap, like I could figure this out.
And then eventually you ended up in a family home. It was your host family. And that was really your first true introduction into the culture of Cameroon?
Yes. So and that was a little over a month after I got there too.
Oh, that was a long time. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And at the time, well, during that month, did you do training and all of that as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they were able to set up these dorms for us. So we had 4 people in each dorm room, like bunk mm-hmm. beds, just all of our stuff was crammed in there. Because it was rushed. And then we had originally planned to go to the second village for training in a safer spot. So wow. We got to go there and I got to be introduced to what it truly meant to be a Cameroonian, live with Cameroonians.
Yeah. And then was that Cameroonian family, was that their first time hosting? Oh, it was. Okay. So yes. You were a new adventure for them as well.
Exactly. We were both figuring it out along the way.
Yeah. And can you tell me a little bit about the family?
The family was truly incredible. They made sure to teach me everything to make sure that I would be safe and that I would be proper. So for example, like my host mom very much stressed, like you have to clean your shoes. And that sounds very strange coming from America where we're like mud splatter shoes, like, okay, whatever, we can wash them later. It's not a big deal.
Right.
But and having proper, like clean and proper shoes and clean and proper clothing, that was such an important thing. And she's like she really stressed it mm-hmm. and refused to let me leave the house. And it's like, it seems silly in the moment. And they're like, okay, like this is I'm being taught Cameroonian culture and how
So were
I
you,
will not be respected if I don't
I was
follow.
going to say, were you at risk of being judged if you had been in, less than perfect attire and less than perfect shoes, that you were at risk of being judged?
Exactly. And it brought me back to when I was in those dorms. I once went straight from my training farm into the local village to get some dinner.
Mhm.
And I didn't change my shoe out of my muddy shoes. And people literally were like, why are your shoes like that? And they were giving me strange looks and it didn't click. I was like, well, I just came from the farm, like obviously. And it didn't click until Fortune, my host mother, was like, no, it has to be clean.
And then did she teach you things like how to cook on what limited items you were going to have to cook with? Like when you ended up in your own place, it was definitely different from being hosted.
Yes, very, very much so. So from a cooking standpoint, she made sure early on to be like, Leigh, you have to learn how to cook. So day one, she taught me how to make a Cameroonian omelet, just like fried eggs, just beaten and fried.
Yeah.
And she's like, you're gonna do this every day, every morning. Like I'm not doing this for you anymore. Then they made sure to teach me. Yeah, right. I needed that though. I definitely needed that.
Yeah. Wow. Because when I was reading the book, what I was struck with is how many parts and pieces you had to put together once you were on your own. Like you had to actually figure out the structure of what you were going to be doing to help people in the village. Like you actually had to put together your own. You weren't jumping in on somebody's program. It was simply like, okay, what do the villagers need when it comes to their agriculture, and how can I provide it for them? But not just that, how can I get them to trust me so that they'll come to my sessions and they'll listen to my educational information? And that part took a lot of assimilating for you to actually be trusted. So tell me a little bit. First, I want to hear, I love the story about your Leigh Marie name turning into Leg Mary. And it's kind of funny that that's how they call, you're a beautiful tall woman. And so the Leg Mary fit you. I almost couldn't think of you as anything other than Leg Mary after I read the book. But I think that part of your visibility in the community really helped. You weren't afraid to go anywhere.
Correct. Yeah, and so I think that's the benefit of having started my own site, was that, yes, it was tougher to have to take the time, and instead of just being this transition of there's someone before me introducing, being like, hey, there's another volunteer coming, like you should really work with them. Starting from scratch, I really got to make sure that anything that we did was what they wanted, what they needed, and would actually help. I wasn't coming in with this plan, a list of ideas. I took months to learn, like, what were they actually interested in. And then it was nice just to form my own reputation, to become my own person in this community instead of people believing that I was someone else. It was harder because I didn't have that foot in the door, but then I think it actually benefited me over time.
Well, it appeared that you did manage to dig your foot into the door, not only with the local farmers, but you ended up with a friendship relationship with a king,
Yes.
who also took you to social events. Tell me about that a little bit.
Of course. So part of the respect thing, when you move to a village, is you have to, we call it protocol in the Peace Corps, but essentially you have to meet the important people of the village and essentially explain, it's a respect thing. You have to explain to them why you're there and what your goals are. And so my counterpart had set up my meeting with the king. And at that meeting, he was like, it's really important. I think it's really important that you learn about our culture and who we are. So do you want to come to a funeral this weekend? And I was like, absolutely. I had not been to a funeral yet. And from there, because I was willing to learn about the culture, because I was seen at these events, and because I was genuinely curious, at the end of my service, someone said, Leigh, there have been white people here before you, but you're the first one to become a part of our community. And that's not just with the farmers, that's with the king, and that's with everybody that I always made sure to say hi to along the route, whether or not I knew them.
That's pretty telling in the type of person that you are, that you're able to not just assimilate, because lots of people can assimilate, but it doesn't mean that they become loved by the people around them. It just means that they manage, and you did a lot more than manage. When
Thank
you
you.
were writing about even just your little by little learning experiences, whether it was the length of a walk and you plan to carry X amount of baggage on your back, and then you quickly realize, no, that's not a good idea. It was amazing to read this book and see you sorting it out piece by piece. How do I keep my goats from running away? Or how do I, what do I do with, how do I get people to understand the collaboration between livestock feces and fertilizer in a way that becomes helpful to them, so that they're not shoveling things away that they're later going to buy at a store and put on their ground.
Exactly. Like that farm integration can help reduce costs so much. But I had to figure out that for myself as well. Like everything's integrated.
Well, and actually the agriculture piece wasn't your first choice initially, was it?
I was in Peru. I was supposed to be a business volunteer with my business background at UVA.
Right.
When I got my assignment, they're like, okay, you're going to be a health volunteer. And then I got to Cameroon. They're like, no, you're going to be an agriculture volunteer. There was a mix up somewhere. And I was just along for the ride.
Yeah. Like whatever you need me to do, I will figure it out. And
Exactly. Because, a Peace Corps service isn't about the volunteer. It's not what I want to do. Like as a job, it's about, having the biggest impact that you can. And if I were to choose something that would take it away, why don't I let the people who know best make those decisions?
I'm surprised also the different aspects of agriculture in Cameroon that were done the same way for generations, and also kind of weren't working. I mean, some of their systems weren't really that effective. And it was interesting to me that that they hadn't already made specific changes and integrated other things that would be more helpful. Did you feel that way when you were there, that you were kind of like, why are they doing it this way?
Not as much, because some of the things that I saw were just done countrywide. And so, if you think something is working and you don't see proof contrary, why are you going to, because changing is a risk. It's a financial risk to make any change, which is why I actually had the model farm, because I was able to have my farm. I was the one taking the risks, and then people could come see it and be like, oh, okay, now that I see that it works, it's not as much of a risk to me to make a change.
Right.
So it's not necessarily that these ideas weren't there. It was that it was just too much of a risk when you're already living.
I hadn't really thought about that. You could lose a year's crops by making the wrong choice, and then you lose your stability and food insecurity.
So it's better to go with what at least works.
Right. It's so funny because now with this pandemic, we hear about food insecurity all the time, and we hear, those of us who are listening heard it a lot anyway, but the idea of food insecurity for a country that has, whether it's an unstable atmosphere or an unstable government or just the landscape, is such a huge problem that becomes their lifelong problem. And when you were talking about, I was intrigued about your mushroom farming and why the mushroom farming was a good idea and why it was important to instill that in the people in Cameroon. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Of course. So as I mentioned before, everything's a risk. The thing about mushrooms is that you grow them there. The way I learned it is you grow them in bags in your own house. So you're not taking away from your farmland by growing your mushrooms. So you're having the diversity. So if a pest comes and eats all your corn, you still have some mushrooms that you can eat, because, this is all subsistence farming. They're eating what they're growing.
Right.
There isn't a grocery store down the street that they can just be like, oh, we ran out of well, there's no milk there, but we ran out of milk. Let's go buy some milk. No, like, so mushrooms was an ability to greatly improve their nutrition without taking any agricultural risk for them, because all their farmland was still being used the same exact way.
Well, I feel like sometimes I want to grow mushrooms after reading your book. There's a lot of things I want to do. Some of them I don't want to do though. You had an experience when your father and your sister came to visit. You had an experience on a bus that sounded like an everyday experience to you, but they were kind of looking at you in horror. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because
that's so
the things that we take for granted are safety issues. Yeah.
It's still something that they talk about when,
oh, really?
Yeah. Because, and I think that's the beauty of the journaling every day, is that, like, for me, like when you're going through something hard, like take the pandemic, for example, we are very like just used to doing meetings over Zoom and everything like that. But at first it was a shock.
Right.
And so on that bus ride, it was just your average 12-hour bus ride. You're cooped up in like a sardine can with 5 people in a row. To me, that was normal because I was over a year into my service.
Right.
So to be that used to something, but then to see it through their eyes for their very first bus ride in Cameroon, I was like, oh, I do remember what that's like. I'm just used to it now. Yeah. And so it's really cool to like go back to my journals. And that's what I did when I was writing this book, is I went back to the journals. I was like, wow, now that my perspectives have changed over time is incredible.
Well, there was something, wasn't there like a stolen bus ticket or stolen money or something like that? And you actually
it was really hard because I was trying to be responsible. Like, I can hold my own, but then I felt like I was also carrying on the burden of two people who, like, clearly two outsiders did not know what they were doing.
Right.
And so I just wanted to get on the bus and get out. And then someone, like, usually people when they're on the bus, like, you're like, okay, like, buy your ticket from me. You don't even like get a card. They just know that you paid.
Right.
But like, that's all I had ever done for over a year. And so when someone does that and then walks off the bus and leaves, and you're like, wait a second, like, what on earth? Like, that's never happened to me before. So it was something that never happened to me before.
Bought a ticket from somebody.
Responsible.
So you bought a ticket from somebody, and then
I bought a ticket from somebody, because usually I get on the bus, I pay, I don't get a piece of paper.
Okay.
And then so I paid for our 3 tickets, and then the person just got up and left, and I was like, I deserve that, because it was really humbling to be like, okay, you know, you've been here for over a year, but you still don't know everything. Right.
Oh my gosh. But you chased him down.
No, I wasn't able to.
Oh, you weren't?
No, I lost that money.
That's too bad.
It's just how things work. You know, we got to the village, and that's all that mattered.
Yeah, well, they'll call that the cost of doing business, but it's quite a cost when you see it from the outside looking in, you know, when you're in the middle of doing it.
And I felt like it was just like I would have been embarrassed to make that mistake to begin with.
Yeah.
But then I felt like I was embarrassed to be making the mistake and then it be in front of my family. And I was like, oh, what have I done?
You made up for it though when you introduced your family to the king.
That's fair.
I want to say, well, but when I read this book, I was so filled with your adventure, but also with your true desire to not have the Peace Corps as a resume builder. Like your genuine desire to help people and to assess what they need and try to fill those needs, whether or not each endeavor was successful, or whether or not you would put together a program and nobody would come to that particular session. And then you'd be like, well, maybe next time they'll come to the next program. And so, but it did give me hope for everyone that does volunteering, hope for all the people who need that extra set of hands when they're in a crisis. And I feel like you're that person. I can't wait to see the other things that you do with your life when you get your law degree, which when I read your resume, trust me, I think we'll just be seeing your name for years on it. Excited.
No pressure at all.
Excited to know you. So do you have any words of wisdom for anyone else, especially at this point in their lives, going out to do volunteer work in any kind of a country that's not their own? What's your best advice?
I think the best advice I can give is to leave your expectations at the door, because you can get very frustrated if, for example, bringing what you know works in America and trying to just bull rush and apply it to another place
Right.
without taking the time to learn what they need or become a part of the community. That's the other piece of advice. Become a part of the community. It makes it like you're safer because people know you. It's a
Right.
lot more fun because you feel like you have family and you're a part of the community. But then also you're just able to get more work done because people will be like you'll talk to someone, bounce ideas off of them for what you want to do. And they'll be like, oh, like that won't work. And, you know, I made the mistake with soybeans on my model farm my first year. Like my counterpart said, like, that's probably not going to work.
Mhm.
I was like, no, it's going to work. It's going to work. And it just, did it work? No.
So the networking piece was so important. Yeah.
Become part of the community are the two biggest pieces of advice I could give.
Yeah, that's great advice. Well, thank you so much for being here. Again, the memoir is called Nothing Works, but Everything Works Out, My Peace Corps Experience in the West Region of Cameroon. You can also, is this available in bookstores as well as Amazon?
Yes, so you can order it. It may not physically be in a bookstore, but if I recommend supporting small businesses anywhere and everywhere. So you can order it through your bookstore. It's
also through your website.
Yes, it's you could find it on my website. It's just my name at wordpress.com.
Okay.
But it's also for those who prefer Kindle versions. It's available on Amazon. It's available everywhere books are sold.
Yeah, very good. Okay. Well, thank you again so much, Leigh, for being with us today. This is Leigh Dannhauser. Thank you.
Thank you.